Thank you, Chairman Cirrus, for holding this hearing on the ongoing crisis in Venezuela. It's an honor to serve as the new ranking member of this subcommittee, and I look forward to working closely with you, Mr. Chairman, on the various issues. And I do believe that when we met the other day, we realized you and I have a lot more overlap in the way we think than the traditional right-left side of the aisle. So I think we're going to have a great time standing up for the people in this hemisphere. Today we're discussing the political and humanitarian crisis caused by the illegitimate Maduro regime that has left a once prosperous country in political and economic shambles. The regime's socialist policies and endemic corruption have resulted in years of economic freefall, hyperinflation, and shortages in basic goods. Venezuela has a poverty rate of 96%, that has driven almost 6 million of its citizens to seek a better life in other regions. This migration crisis has strained the resources of neighboring countries in the region, including Colombia, our closest regional partner impacted by the Venezuelan crisis. In addition to the economic crisis, the Maduro regime is among the world's worst violators of human rights, including recent accusations of crimes against humanity by the UN's fact-finding mission. According to local human rights group Foro Penal, there are currently close to 330 political prisoners in Venezuela, not including the illegal detention of 6 American Citgo executives held on false charges and without due process. But the regime cannot carry out these atrocities alone. It has been bolstered by some of the world's most brutal regimes. The communist regime in Cuba has successfully exported its oppressive system to Venezuela and directly supports the Maduro regime's oppressive tactics and human rights abuses. Further, the Chinese Communist Party has provided billions in loans to the regime and was recently found to be sharing technology used to surveil political opposition figures. The Maduro regime has also strengthened ties with Russia, which has provided military equipment, and Iran, which has joined Russia in helping the Maduro regime avoid U.S. oil sanctions. The regime has also built ties with the region's non-state criminal actors, including FARC and ELN, U.S.-designated criminal groups who are allowed free rein in Venezuela to carry out narco-trafficking, illegal mining, and other illicit activities. I applaud the Trump administration for leading international recognition of the interim president, Juan Guaido, and for holding the Maduro regime accountable by imposing tough and necessary sanctions on Venezuela's state oil company and individuals accused of corruption and human rights abuses. Some claim that U.S. sanctions are to blame for the country's economic crisis. But I want to be very clear today. The Maduro regime alone is responsible for the crisis and for blocking humanitarian assistance from entering Venezuela. I applaud the European Union for recent sanctioning 19 Maduro regime officials, and I strongly condemn the Maduro regime's expulsion of their ambassador in retaliation. The United States has also led humanitarian efforts by donating more than $1.2 billion in assistance to Venezuela and its neighbors in the region to address this humanitarian crisis. And while the United States is proud to lead, I urge the rest of the international community to join us in this effort. I also applaud the brave efforts of the interim government and the democratic opposition, which has withstood violent oppression and has been illegally removed from the rightful posts in the National Assembly through Maduro regime's illegitimate elections. These brave men and women deserve our support as they seek freedom for the Venezuelan people. Additionally, I was pleased to hear that the Biden administration will continue to recognize President Guaido as the legitimate leader of Venezuela, and while I believe there is a role for multilateralism in addressing the crisis, the United States must continue to lead these efforts. The Maduro regime's continued subversion of democratic institutions, human rights abuses, and criminal activities demonstrate their unwillingness to reform. I believe that dialogue with this criminal regime cannot be possible without a clear demonstration that they are willing to negotiate in good faith. The United States Congress and this committee will play a critical role in overseeing U.S. policy in Venezuela and ensuring that we have a comprehensive strategy that will lead to a peaceful, democratic transition for the Venezuelan people. The crisis in Venezuela does not only impact our neighbors in South America, It threatens the United States' national security, and we cannot afford to allow it to worsen. I look forward to the testimonies of our witnesses today, and Mr. Chairman, working with you, and I yield back.